Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Hey, we want to look at Psalm 143 to see some patterns and pathways for healing and restoring and rebuilding relationships. So when we look at God's Word, we can see how we can grow in how we relate to each other, not just in our relationship with God, but how we relate in other relationships, and definitely in our marriage, and how we can use these concepts that he's showing here to build our relationship skills.
So we saw some things that stood out that we recognized in what we do with couples, and so we just wanted to kind of do a Bible study on Psalm 143, take it a little deeper and show you what we were looking at.
One person is bringing a request and the other person is hearing the request, so he's setting up what roles are. And so there's different rules that you would say apply to the person that's making a request, differing from the person who's hearing the request.
So notice the setup. He doesn't just throw it out and start off with, this is what's happening, this is what I want you to do about it.
Yeah.
And so, we suggest for couples, consider something like, there's something I'd like to share with you. When is a good time?
He's making a request. He's not making a demand. So we always want to acknowledge that the person that we're speaking with has their own free will, and they have their own freedom to make a decision.
Yeah, suggest using wording like, would you please do or not do blank for me. As simple as that, because, if communication isn't like it needs to be, we don't want to dive into deeper, more information if the relationship doesn't support it.
Some things that are going to help in this are going to be listening attentively and having an intention to act in response to what's being presented. So looking at verse 2, he says, enter not into judgment with your servant. You don't want to make assumptions about the person that we're speaking to or that we're hearing.
In our relationship, not to mention previous relationships, family of origin, we have kind of been trained to expect certain things. So we don't have to get to the point where it's all ramped up to get anxious or frustrated. We can just see the signs that it's going there. And so we need to give our spouse space to change, allow some change, and not assume because it looks like something, it therefore is something. Better to ask.
Yeah.
It feels like this is going on. Is this what's going on?
Yeah.
Allow the spouse to be in on the decision-making process of actually what's happening, especially on their part of the relationship, rather than just assuming this is how it is.
Let's look at verse 3, and we kind of begin to see the impact of a behavior on the relationship. He says, for the enemy has persecuted, smitten, and he's dwelling in darkness. And so one thing you can see here is that the enemy is not the person that you're in relationship with. So in marriage, your enemy is not your spouse. The enemy is this other entity, this other thing that's impacting how we relate to each other. And we want to be able to separate our spouse from a behavior that's causing a certain result in the relationship.
When we notice the persecuted, that's pursued like a predator would pursue prey. Some things can feel aggressive and, kind of wear us down. Notice the smitten there. It has to do with being crushed to pieces. There are things that can happen in our relationships, in our lives, that can cause that feeling of being crushed. Darkness, isolated, as those that have been long dead. Sometimes we can feel that our dreams are forgotten, that we're not seen, isolated or alone. So notice the kind of the spectrum of negativity that could be going on as a result of something that needs to happen for us to grow, to move out of a negative zone.
We want to understand the impact that certain behaviors have on the relationship quality. So notice in verse 4, he says, therefore is my spirit overwhelmed, my heart within me is desolate. So this is having a very challenging impact on the quality of the relationship because of something that's taking place.
I think of the person that's overwhelmed as the person that's maybe escalating. and the desolate as the one that's maybe withdrawing, my heart within. It's like I'm going inside. And so when we don't address our stuff and we dismiss or minimize, it can create the overwhelm, the desolate feeling over time.
So let's go into verse 5, and here we see it's kind of setting up the things that need to take place as we prepare to move toward a positivity in the relationship. I remember, I meditate, and I muse. So he is calling back to remembrance some positive things that have happened in the past that have set up good ways of looking at the person. And he moves into verse 6 and he says, I stretch forth my hands and my soul thirsts after you. So there's an increased desire, an increasing reaching out to build a relationship after having recalled the positive things. And so all that positivity in recalling has now created, now I'm reaching out to you, and now I want to see this repaired and built.
And you know, when there's something going on that needs to improve, or something we're dealing with individually that we need to share to come alongside and strengthen, it's in this state of mind that we would then share. You know, the next verses are good responses that we can give when someone shares with us, or maybe what we're looking for, that we can make a request from our spouse when we're the one sharing.
Yeah, so in verse 7, he says, hear me speedily and don't hide your face from me. And so these are important responses that the person hearing the request is going to need to not just take their time about responding. You're wanting to have that engagement back and forth. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, you know, and if you need some time maybe to say, hey, I need to think about that. I need to process what you said.
Yeah.
And don't hide your face. It's not withdrawing. Don't withdraw when maybe, you know, your spouse said something difficult. Maybe it was challenging for you to kind of wrap your head around what they said, but don't pull back from them by, you know, giving what may effectively feel like the silent treatment.
Yeah, you know, some people are less verbal and maybe go blank at a time where something difficult is shared, and we encourage, have a pocket full of responses you can lean on, like, that sounds challenging. Would you tell me more? How does that make you feel? What do you need me to understand about what's going on right now? And, you know, notice my spirit fails, lest I be like to them that go down into the pit. Notice the negativity that can happen when our spouse brings something to us and there's not a response. There's a withdrawal. We are not present to do this together in this relationship. You know, hesitancy and refusal to respond well ignores the spirit of relationship, abandons unity, and leaves the other to withstand the attack alone. And it could cause the relationship to fail, the relationship to be like those that go into the pit that die. And so since we don't want to go there, we want to have swift positive action that says, I'm there for you. You matter, and that prevents further damage. And the withdrawal, if we pull back, instead of being present in there, it can communicate, I'm not there for you. You don't matter. I'm disinterested in your need. I'm only invested in what matters to me, and this doesn't qualify. We don't want to send messages like that, and a lot of people would never intentionally send a message like that. But sometimes we're not really clear on what our nonverbals are saying. They're communicating nonverbally.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point there. In verse 8, he says, cause me to hear your loving kindness in the morning, for in you I trust. So this is where we start looking at trust being established and getting a new start in the relationship. And so trust being reestablished is happening in an environment where consistency in a positive behavior is taking place. And so, you know, we can sometimes mix up the difference between forgiveness and trust being reestablished. And so you can choose to forgive someone, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you now trust that person completely if there's been some negative betrayals in the past. And so it's going to take some consistent positive behavior to reestablish that.
It has to be rebuilt.
It does.
But what we want in response is loving kindness. And so when we hear the grievance, the complaint, the situation that's going on, that an enemy is causing, the waters are being stirred in a negative direction, we need to respond in a loving, kind way, not a, well, what's wrong with you, a push away, a distancing, but instead an embrace of being there because there's trust. Because if we don't respond well and we respond instead badly, we betray that trust and damage that trust. And it says, cause me to know the way wherein I should walk. I'm lifting up my soul to you. I'm being vulnerable to you. I'm opening up to you to let you in. Show me the way. There's a way for us to walk together. This is a two-sided thing here. I may have a change I'm requesting, but you're involved in that picture.
Yeah.
I may have a struggle I'm dealing with, but if I'm reaching to you to come alongside and give me strength and support, you're in that picture. And so being able to verbalize, and what would this look like for us to journey like this, to take care of this together?
Yeah. So in verse 9, he says, deliver me from my enemies. I flee to you to hide me. So in a close friendship, we're fighting the enemy together, and we're not left to fight alone, but we're supported in the relationship. We're linking arms together, and we're saying we're coming together as a unit against this other thing that's impacting the relationship in a negative way.
And you know, if a spouse is stepping on the other spouse's emotional toes, we can bring deliverance by just making a shift, making a change. I don't have to keep triggering you.
Yeah.
You may need to heal in an area, but that doesn't mean it's okay for me to just trigger you all the time.
Right.
I can be aware. Notice the fleeing and hiding. We need to be a safe place for each other.
Yeah.
We should be a place where even if it's something with us, I need to change my tone of voice. He needs to change a facial expression that's causing some negativity and messing with our ability to communicate, right?
Yeah.
We need to be a safe place to talk about things like that.
Yeah.
And where if something's bothering me, it matters to you to join me and not leave me alone to fight this enemy. You know, in a lot of marriages, somebody's got a challenge with the way we communicate, the way we're coming across. And the other one is dismissing, invalidating, minimizing that. Basically saying, I don't see that as a problem. And we leave that other spouse then in a place to fight the enemy alone and then wonder down the road, well, what happened? Why aren't you still here? Well, you kind of left the spouse being attacked by an enemy.
Yeah.
And you said, it's not a problem, while they were devoured, while they were weakened.
Right. If it's impacting one of us, it's impacting both of us.
Right.
So in verse 10, he says, teach me. And he said, your spirit is good. So being open and having this coaching mentality of, we know your spouse doesn't just know what you need unless you tell them. So there needs to be open line of communication so that you can teach your spouse what you need in the relationship.
Yeah. And you know, when it says, teach me your will, that's got to do with what pleases you, what's acceptable. Like we said, it's two-sided. I may be the speaker. I may be sharing something that needs addressed, but we're both in this together. And coaching looks like, what I really need to hear from you right now is, and what's really going on with me in this moment is. And so we're trusting in the goodwill. We're not assuming you were ill-intentioned when you said that. Most of us are not. Most of us step on each other's emotional, relational toes unintentionally because it means something different to one than to the other. When we look at the land of uprightness, we're talking about a place, a zone we can get in that feels safe, and we're making right choices for the relationship. My choices when I'm upright before God are this way, not this way. I don't make right choices because you deserve it or because I feel like it. I make right choices because it's the right choice.
So you want to look at creating that zone, that place in your relationship that feels like you're safe for me to come to. In verse 11, he says, quicken me for your name's sake and for your righteousness' sake. So here's where we can see there's things being done to bring life back into the relationship, a quickening. And he says, for your name's sake. That kind of indicates there's a reputation for your, I know what you stand for, your name stands for your righteousness' sake. So there's choices made, and there is a reputation that you begin to have with your partner that you're going to do the right thing.
Because we can change negative expectations into positive or at least neutral expectations by consistently responding well, establishing our character to our spouse. Because if we consistently do things that have a negative feeling for our spouse, even if we didn't mean it, we eventually begin to associate ourselves with those negative feelings that we triggered. And so it would behoove us to be aware of that picture, to disassociate from the enemy's impact, and instead to consistently prove ourselves faithful in the relationship. Notice the brings the soul out of trouble, the calming the troubled soul, the trouble in the relationship when we're responding for righteousness' sake. And I like verse 12 here, of your mercy cut off all my enemies, destroy all them that afflict my soul. I'm your servant. There's a relationship here. Let's don't stop here with just working on this. Let's move on. Is there anything else that's afflicting any area of our lives, of our relationship? Well, let's go there together. Let's talk about what does that look like so that our land, our marital relational land, is free from enemies.
You know, the deeper we go, we're going to keep coming across this pathway of how to grow closer in our relationship, to address things that are bringing affliction to our spouse, and we can get to one level, and now we don't want to think, well, that's the last time that we're going to have to grow. No, we want to continue to grow deeper, and as you go deeper, you're going to come across things that have kept you from being closer in the past, and now you've got to go through this progression or this pathway of growth and deepening your relationship.